Okay, we're going to start the Mishnah on Daf Vav and Aleph. Ketzan mafrishim challah b'tumah b'yom tov. How do you separate challah that became tamei on Yom Tov? Let's explain what's going on. Challah is what you take off from the dough and it's given to the kohen. Now, on Yom Tov, you're allowed to bake and cook, but only things that you're allowed to eat. The problem is that because this challah became tamei, you can't eat it, and the kohen can't eat it. You can't eat it anyway, but the kohen can't eat it. Now, there's a rule that you're not allowed to burn kachim on Yom Tov. The problem is now you have dough. If you leave it, it's going to become chametz.
We're not doing it Pesach.
It is Pesach. Yeah, it's Pesach. Yeah. We're not familiar with this, but they would bake on Pesach. Yeah, they would bake on Pesach. They make matzah. The whole Yom Tov. It's flour. You have to keep it whatever, and you have 18 minutes. You can make it.
Why don't we do it?
Yeah, it's probably complications with the waste. The things that stuck on the side, the pots and all of that. Right. I'm not sure why it switched. So it became more religious. So there's a problem over here. If you're going to leave it, it's going to become chametz. If you're going to put it in the oven to bake it so it doesn't become chametz, then you're baking something that you're not allowed to eat. And on Yom Tov, you're only allowed to bake things that you're allowed to eat, right? Then there's another issue. Let's say I could burn it. Just burn it because it's challah that's tamei. You're not allowed to sarfin kachim b'Yom Tov, even if it becomes possible. So we're going to have three opinions here. Two opinions that we'll discuss, and one is just mentioned. Rabbi Eliezer Reimer is Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkenes. He says, "Leitikra l'shem ma'chatiyafah." He has a solution. Solution is don't say that it's challah. Then you could bake it, and you'll take the challah later. So I know one of these loaves is not going to be edible, but right now I don't know which one. So they can all go into the oven, and later on it's going to come out that one of them wasn't allowed to be baked. But right now, at this point, I could bake it. No, but because you didn't, it's a little trick. It's a trick. Ben Beseiraim Tato B'Tzainet. Ben Beseira says you can't do that. You have to put it into cold water to make it not become chametz. The cold water till the end of the day, it's Yom Tov now. So you have to do something to it that it never doesn't become chametz. You have to, if you leave it, it's going to become chametz. You have to put it into cold water. Amar Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua says, says this is not the chametz that the Torah is talking about. Why? Because the Torah says, your own chametz you're not allowed to see, but you're allowed to see chametz from a non-Jew, or you're allowed to see chametz from hekdesh. So what you do is you call it challah. Call it challah. You don't give it to the kohen, but you make it hekdesh, and then it's not yours. You're fine. You're exempt. Interesting machlekes here. Machlekes Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. Yeah, so if you're mafkir it, that's interesting. Why can't you just be mafkir it? Well, because you're not resolving the challah issue. You have to make it. Yeah, no. You need to eat your other. You need your food. So you want it to become challah. Because if you don't take challah, you can't eat the rest of your food. You can't eat the rest of your bread. The question is, how do you make it challah? So Rebbe Lezer has a solution: make it challah after it's already baked, and you don't have the violation of chametz. Rabbi Shua says, don't worry about the violation of chametz because it's not yours. Just make it challah and bake the rest of your bread. Uh-huh.
I can't hear that question, but I'm sure it was mine also.
The question was, why can't you just be mevatel it? Just consider it like it's not there. At which point do you want to be mevatel it? So if it's before you bake it, then you never took challah. So let's say, okay, I hear what you want to say. Take the challah, separate the challah, and then be mevatel. The problem is once you make it challah, then you can't be mevatel. It's like sort of out of your domain, right? Oh, because until I separate challah from my dough, I can't eat any of my dough. I want to be able to eat the rest of my dough. That's the catch. No, I'm not eating the challah. I'm eating. I have a whole thing of dough here. I take off one pinch, or 148, or 124, and that allows me to eat the rest of it. Now, if I don't solve that, then I can't eat the rest. You hear this complication, sir. So the Gemara suggests, let's say that the machlekes between Rebbe Lezer and Rabbi Shua is a machlekes regarding Tovas Hana. The way Tovas Hana works is that let's say someone goes over to a kohen. He says, I'll give you a little bit of money, but provide my son-in-law, my daughter and son-in-law, grandchildren with all the trumas and meisers and whatever. So, in other words, this guy has a field, and he wants that all this property owners, the field, all the trumas and meisers go to his children that happens to be a kohen. So, what does he do? He gives him a bit of money, and all the trumas and meisers are going to go to this guy. It's called tovas hana. The owner of the field is gaining something because he has the rights to choose who is going to distribute the trumas and meisers. So that ownership, that ability to choose where I'm going to. No, it's not a kohen either. We're talking about two people, Reuven and Shimon. Reuven has a field. Shimon comes over to him and says, my daughter married a kohen. My grandchildren are kohenim, and my daughter can eat the truma and all of that. With this coin, would you be satisfied to give all your trumas to my family members? So that's a certain ownership that the person has because he can choose where he wants to allocate his trumas, where he wants them to go. Okay, so Rabbi Lezer says that he actually owns it. In other words, he has some ownership here in the challah. You hear what's going on? Rabbi Yeshua said, "Don't worry about the challah, that piece of challah." It's confusing because challah means the bread that we have on Shabbos. Hey, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the challah that's given to the that's separate. Yeah, that Mordechai Shmudder is a funny writer. So he wrote one of his books says, "Don't shout challah in a crowded matzah bakery." So, but anyway, challah is actually shouted in a crowded matzah bakery because they have to separate challah. So anyway, why is Rabbi Yeshua not concerned about the baking, about the separating of the challah? Because he says it's totally not yours. And why is Rabbi Eliezer concerned about the separating it as challah? Because he says it still is yours. So Rabbi Yeshua said, you follow what's going on. There's a machlekes Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua what to do with this challah. Rabbi Eliezer says you have to bake it, and you'll make it challah later. Why can't I make it challah now? It says because if you make it challah now, then it's going to become chametz, and it's still yours. Rabbi Yeshua says no, make it challah now, let it become chametz, and it's not yours. Don't worry about it. What's the machlokes? Is taiva sana the rights that you have to give to whichever kain you want? Is that considered an ownership of it? That's the machlokes. Umar says like. That's not the machlokes Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. The machlokes is something else, slightly more complex. The kuli alma savri tevasana inamam, and everyone holds that that's not considered a real ownership, the tevasana. So if that's the case, then what's Rabbi Eliezer concerned about? That you have to make it challah only after you bake it. You do this trick. What's the concern? The concern is here v'hacha b'hayil kamiflagi. The machlokes is about the term hayil. Hayil means since. What does that mean? Let's see. Rabbi Eliezer holds Amrin and Hayil. Rabbi Eliezer says you say since. You say Hayil. What is the Hayil? Hayil v'ibai mitchalala mamainahu. Says mitchal means that you can ask. Bishayil. That means you can go to a chacham and be mataneder. In other words, there's a string attached to this. You designate it as challah, which means that it's not yours. But because I can pull it back to me by going to a chacham and say that I want to be mater neder and I want to change it. Apparently, you can switch anything that's designated verbally. You can go to a chacham and say I regret it and I want to take it back. So Rabbi Eliezer holds. So the problem is here, according to Rabbi Eliezer, don't say that it's challah now. First bake it so you resolve the chametz issue, and then you designate it challah later. Because if you would say that it's challah now and take Rabbi Yeshua's logic, that, well, it's not yours anymore, there's no prohibition. Only your own chametz is a problem. This isn't yours. It's not true. Because you're able to get it back, it still is attached to you. How do you get it back? By going to a chacham and say, I regret the statement that I made. So therefore, it's still associated with you. So therefore, don't make it challah. Now make it challah after the chametz issue is resolved. You're not doing that. But because you're able to do that, this is Rabbi Eliezer opinion, who says hayil. Therefore, Rabbi Eliezer wants you to resolve the chametz issue immediately. Bake it. Don't designate it as challah, because designated as challah is not going to help your chametz issue. Hayil by mitchalala, because you can ask a chacham and take it back. Rabbi Yeshua sabar la'imrin and hayil. Rabbi Yeshua says we don't say hayil because you can take it back. The fact is that right now you made it challah and it's not yours. So shalachayat teraya, don't worry about it. It's not your chametz. No problem. Okay, Itmar. But now we're going to discuss this concept of hayil. Probably the whole issue of chametz shavuot of Pesach, according to us, was because there was an issue karas on it. So there's a knas. But probably there would be no problem of chametz shavuot of Pesach. Just like by a non-Jew. A non-Jew has chametz over Pesach afterwards. It's no problem, right? That's what we rely on. Yeah. Okay. Itmar, there's a statement we're on Mem Vav Amid Beis. There's a statement of Amirayim. It says, if someone bakes, what happened was he had his Yom Tov meal. And he goes into the kitchen to do more baking. He doesn't need that food anymore. He already ate. So he's baking now for after Yom Tov. It's a little bit of a problem, because you're only supposed to do malachas for Yom Tov, not for Eichel Nefesh, for things that you need on Yom Tov. On the Yom Tov, you're allowed to bake and cook for the food that you need. Right? Rav Chisda says that you get malchus if you do this, because you're not baking for Yom Tov, you're baking for after Yom Tov. What's for which prohibition? Leisasa kal malacha, you're not allowed to do malacha. It's like there's a heter if you need it, right? it's eichel nefesh, you need to eat it. Rabba Amar Eina like Rabba says you don't get malchus. What's the machlekes about? Rav Chisda Malaika. Rav Chisda says that you get malchus because you see, you don't need the food. So you're baking it for what? For after Yom Tov. Your meal is over. We're talking about Shalosh Shudas. There's no Shalosh Shudas, but we're talking about that that it's not necessary for you. You ate already. But it's very possible that someone is going to show up and need some food, and you finished all of the lunch food, and someone may come up right now, right before Shkia, and need something to eat. So Rav Chisda says, we don't say that. We don't say Hayel, since someone may show up. Therefore, this was permissible. We don't say that. Rav Chisda doesn't hold of Hayel, that same concept of since it's possible that maybe, right? The what ifs, right? Rabba Amarina like it. Rabba says that you don't get malchus. Why? Amrin and Hayel, maybe a guest is going to show up, and this was permissible. Now, it turns out a guest didn't show up, but it doesn't matter. Amrin and Hayel, we say that since a guest could show up, that's that same concept of Hayel, since. Amalei Rabba Rav Chisda. Rabba says to Rav Chisda. Chisda says that we don't say Hayel, there's malchus. Rav Chisda is very strict. He says, according to you, that you don't say maybe guests are going to show up. How are you allowed to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos? If Friday is Yom Tov, how are you allowed to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos? According to me, Rabbah, I say that maybe guests are going to show up, so I can cook all Friday. I don't need the food because I ate lunch already. It doesn't matter, but maybe a guest is going to show up, I can cook. Oh, no guest showed up. Okay, I have food for Shabbos. But according to you, that you're not allowed to cook because maybe guests are going to show up. So how are you allowed to cook for Shabbos? He responds, I made an Erev Tavshilin. I designated food before Yom Tov, right? That's Erev Tavshilin. On Thursday, you separate. You say that this food with this Erev, I'm going to be able to cook tomorrow. Rabbi asks him, well, you do this thing yesterday, and now you're allowed to, there's an Erev here, so I'm allowed to violate the Yom Tov.
It's called a loophole. It's called a loophole. We're very familiar.
So Amalei, he responds, Midaraisa tzarchi Shabbos nasim b'Yom Tov. Actually, Yom Tov and Shabbos have the same kedusha. This is the logic over here. That really, if I'm allowed to cook for Yom Tov, I'm allowed to cook for Shabbos, which is immediately after Yom Tov. So Midaraisa, I'm allowed to cook today. It's one big holiday. It's not saying I'm cooking from Yom Tov to Shabbos. I'm cooking for the holiday. It's one kedusha. Now the rabbis made a decree. It's for Rabbanan who the Gozer Bey. The rabbis made a decree not to cook from the rabbis made a decree not to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos. Someone may cook not for Shabbos. He may cook for the regular weekday. Maybe Yom Tov is going to be on a Wednesday. He's going to cook for Thursday. Because look, I'm home all day. I'm in the kitchen. Why not? I'll cook for tomorrow before the family goes home. We'll have a meal tomorrow. So they said that you're not allowed to do. That's for sure you're not allowed to do. That's a deraisa. So therefore, even if Yom Tov is on a Friday, you're not allowed to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos unless you made a special Erev Tavshilin. What does that help? They made it. They made it a symbol to recognize that normally you're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to cook from Yom Tov for after Yom Tov, and unless you made an Erev Tavshilin. So therefore, no one's going to violate it to cook from Wednesday just for a plain Thursday. If Yom Tov is on a Friday, you make an Erev Tavshilin, you're allowed to cook from Friday to Shabbos. That's a rabbinic decree. Really, midday rice, you're allowed to cook anyway. The rabbinic decree, because you may end up doing it during a regular weekday. So they said Erev Tavshilin, make an Erev Tavshilin, so you don't end up doing it by a weekday. Okay, that was the conversation, Rav Chizda and Rabbah. It's a big discussion over here. Who do we paskin like? Paskin like Rabbah. And therefore, which means we say Hayel, but because of Hayel, in other words, according to Rabbah, the logic is, why am I allowed to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos? I need an Erev Tavshilin, but my main logic is that the food needs to be ready on Yom Tov. Maybe guests are going to come. So I don't do this for a weekday. So he also holds with that. But he also holds that you need an Erev Tavshilin. But what's the heter on Yom Tov to cook? Is only because the food is going to be ready on Yom Tov. Maybe a guest is going to come. He's using the logic of maybe a guest is going to come on Yom Tov. Rabbinically not. See, the difference between now, what comes out, the difference between Rabbah and Rav Chizda is, does the food need to be ready on Yom Tov in case guests are going to arrive? Rav Chizda says, where did you get that from? That has nothing to do with this. I'm allowed to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos. I can start cooking on, right before Shkia. The food's not going to be ready, but I don't need it to be ready for guests. It's one Kedusha. According to Rabbah, no, you need it to be ready for guests. On Yom Tov, you have a heter on Yom Tov to cook because maybe guests are going to arrive, and you end up using it for Shabbos. Yeah. People don't realize that you really have to start the cooking in the morning, so be ready for at least late afternoon. Maybe someone's going to show up, right? Okay. Esvei. There's a question. Behema hamasukenes, an animal that's dangerously ill. Now, it's not a treifa, but we're afraid that it's going to die and you're going to lose all the meat. So you want to shecht it. But if this is on Yom Tov, so you're not allowed to just go ahead and shecht it, and you'll have the meat it's going to be a kosher animal, you're hoping. Even though it's old and whatever, it's going to die. But if you can shecht it before it dies, you'll be able to have the meat. The problem is that it's Yom Tov in the afternoon, and how you're going to be able to prepare it to be able to eat it. So it says that if you can get a kazayas of tzli, which is a very quick way of, you have to do the salting, and you can also, it cooks quickly, it roasts. You can roast a kazayas, that's going to be good. You shechted a whole animal just for one kazayas? Yeah, well, you don't have any option. You have to shech the whole animal to get one kazayas. So I can shech the whole animal as long as I can eat that kazayas. Yachal lechal, afal gav d'loi boi lemechal. You see, it says that you only potentially need to be able to have, there's a potential that you could eat a kazayas. It doesn't say that you have to actually eat a kazayas. See, we say hayel. This is Rabbah saying, I say hayel, that since you'll be able to eat a kazayas, you're allowed to shecht it. That's why you're allowed to shech. Why, according to you, are you allowed to shech this if you're not actually going to eat it? If you say, since I might be able to, that permits it, then good. But according to Rav Chizda, you don't say that. It's a loss of money. Now, that's possibly the wrong answer. Let's see. Rabbah says, he gets attacked. He says, what? Because of a loss of money, so you're allowed to violate biblical laws over here? What's going on? Amalei in, yes. Mishum hefsid memayne gomer beli by lechel kazayas v'yafshel kazayas possible shchita. You see, it's not that he's going to shecht it without eating the kazayas. Because he knows that there's a loss of money, So we're sure that he's going to make sure that he gets a kazayas to eat from it. He's going to force himself to eat, even though he already ate. Because of the hefsid mammon, you see, it's not, according to Rabbah, I don't have to do anything. According to Rav Chizda, what the Gemara meant by saying if he's able to eat, it meant not that he's able to eat. He's able and he's going to force himself to eat because he doesn't want to lose the whole animal. That's what he's learning. And he says because of the loss of money, he's going to force himself to eat that kazayas. Okay, that's his answer. But he's avoiding the concept of hayel. Rav Chizda doesn't want to say hayel. Since Esvei, the Gemara has a question. Lechem apanim necha letisha lasara l'lachadasar. We're on top of Mem Zayin. The bread, the show bread, is eaten 9 days old, right? Something like it, 9 days old. For 10 days old or 11 days old. Thank you. Beautiful. Yeah, that it stayed fresh. It stayed warm, actually. Warm. And they took it out to show, right? So it goes like this. Like possibly I said, not more than 9, 10, or 11. Kate said, how does it work? Kedarka, in a regular situation, it's Letitia. It's 9 days. Nefa Erev Shabbos. They baked it on Erev Shabbos. They would slide it into the racks on Shabbos. On Shabbos, yeah. They baked it on Friday, not on Shabbos. They would bake it on Friday, and then they would slide it into the racks on Shabbos. On Shabbos day. Then the bread that was there would be taken out and eaten, which meant the bread that you just put in would be eaten the following Shabbos when they would slide in the new breads. They would take out the old one. So the way it works is like this. From Sunday to Shabbos is 7 days, a week. Shabbos to Shabbos is 8. Friday to Shabbos is 9. That's how it works. It's counting the day, both days. Yeah. So you have to view it from Sunday to Shabbos is a week. That's 7 days. Now Shabbos to Shabbos is 8. Friday to Shabbos is 9. It's like a bris. A bris is on, if the baby's born on a Wednesday, the bris is on a Wednesday. That's 8 days later. Why? It's the 8th day. It's the 8th day. Okay. Nefa Shabbos, Nechel b'Shabbos. That's the case of Letitia. Chal Yom Tov liyis b'Erev Shabbos. Let's say there's Yom Tov on Erev Shabbos. You hear what he's going to ask already. If Yom Tov's on Erev Shabbos, so Nechel l'Shabbos, it's eaten on Shabbos. That's Lasara. Why? Because you had to bake it on Thursday. Friday was 9 days. Thursday now is 10 days. Shnei Yom Tovim Shalosh Hashanah. There was a complication over there. Because if the Eidim came after Mincha, so then both days were considered Rosh Hashanah. And you would count, so if Rosh Hashanah was really Friday, but the Eidim came Thursday afternoon, after the carbon was already brought, the afternoon, so Thursday was also considered, you weren't supposed to do extra malachas on Thursday. So you had to bake it on Wednesday. And it's still Nechal l'Shabbos. So that is a case of Liachad Asar. Because baking the bread does not push off Shabbos or Yom Tov. You can't bake it on Shabbos, you can't bake it on Yom Tov. So it ends up sometimes being 11 days. Rashi has an interesting point over here that he says, in the case that we just gave, that Shnei Yom Tovim of Rosh Hashanah, turns out that the following Shabbos is Yom Kippur. How are they going to eat the bread for 11 days? You can't eat it on Yom Kippur. You follow? So we can't bake on Yom Tov. We can't bake on Yom Tov. Why? Because you're not eating it on Yom Tov. I need it. No, I need it only. What's considered need for food is when you need to eat it. So you can't bake it if you're not going to eat it. When do you need it? When are you going to eat it? You're going to eat it the following Shabbat. Now, this doesn't disturb Shabbos of the Yom Kippur. That's Rashi's question. Rashi answers. Rashi says, maybe you're allowed to eat it on Yom Kippur. Is that possible?
No.
Rashi says you're going to eat it the night after Yom Kippur.
What's in
Yeah. He says you're going to eat it Matzah Yom Kippur. Why? Because Kachim the Laila Helach Acharayan. He has another way of making a calculation over here. And what's going to happen is Yom Kippur is really Sunday. That's what the Rashi gives two answers. One answer is that even though I had to keep Thursday as Rosh Hashanah, right? Thursday and Friday were Rosh Hashanah, but Thursday was not the first day of the month, which would make the following Shabbos Yom Kippur. The first day of Tishrei was really Friday, even though it was Rosh Hashanah. So, Yom Kippur turns out to be Sunday. So, okay, it's not the way our Yom Kippur would fall out. But the other option is that even if it is Yom Kippur, you can eat it at night. Rabbi Hirschsprung in Montreal gave us a share. I remember one of his year, and he was asking us. He was asking us how the others were able to keep Shabbos if they had a din of a ben Noach. Ben Noach is not allowed to keep Shabbos. So how could they keep Shabbos in that? So he told us. He showed us a sheet of Betzos. I remember he showed us that by a non-Jew, the night follows the day. By a Jew, all our holidays start at night, and the day follows the night. So therefore, what they would do is like this: the others would keep Shabbos regular, and Motzei Shabbos they would do a malacha, because for them a Shabbos isn't Friday night Shabbos. For them, Shabbos is Shabbos Saturday night, and they have to keep the whole Saturday night. The opposite, they have a different calendar, so they could keep the Jewish Shabbos and not keep the Ben Noach Shabbos. So if they were Jewish, they kept it. Okay, what are we bringing over here? We're bringing Rabbah is asking Rav Chisda a question. Rav Chisda claims that Shabbos and Yom Tov are one kedusha, and therefore you're allowed to do work on Yom Tov that you need it for Shabbos. V'yamar tzarchi Shabbos nasim b'Yom Tov amar leidachi Yom Tov. 1 second. What do you need the bread for Shabbos? So Shabbos and Yom Tov are the same. Bake it on Yom Tov. He answers, you're baking it for Shabbos a week later. They were only matir for Shabbos tomorrow, not for a week later. He asks like this: Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, Reb Shimon ben Askan, Deiches Yom Tov ina Deiches Yom Tov Ma'ikol Meimar. Reb Shimon ben Askan doesn't say that. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, the neighbor of Reb Shimon ben Askan, he says that the lechem upon him pushes off Yom Tov. You're allowed to bake it on Yom Tov. You're only not allowed to bake it on Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, because there's no Eichel Nefesh that wouldn't be mutter there because you can't eat. So, well, yeah, but this is he's asking on Rav Chisda doesn't hold the payil anyway, right? So he says like this: B'hapligi. That's actually the machlekes. Mar savar shvus kroiva hitiru shvus recheka la yitiru. One opinion is that you're only, which is what Rav Chisda was claiming before, that you're not allowed to cook on Yom Tov for a week later Shabbos, and that's why over here by the lechem apanim it says that you're not allowed to bake it on Yom Tov. Mar savar shvus recheka na yitiru, and Reb Shimon ben Gamliel in the name of Reb Shimon Askan holds that because Shabbos and Yom Tov is one kedusha, so even though it's a week later, you're still allowed to bake on Yom Tov for Shabbos. Masiv Rav Murray. Rav Murray has a question. Shtei alechem. This is the 2 loaves of bread that are brought on Shavuos. A slight complication here because when you bring the breads, they're not allowed to be eaten until you bring after you bake the breads, it can't be eaten until after you bring the sheaf, the kvasim that are brought, and then you sprinkle the blood, then you're allowed to eat the bread. So, they're not eaten less than the 2 days and no more than 3 days. It means they have to be baked before. Why do they have to be baked before? Because I'm not allowed to bake it on Yom Tov. Because when I'm baking it, it's not Eichel Nefesh at that time. It's only after the sheep are brought that I'm allowed to eat it. So I can't bake something that I can't eat right now. Kate said, how does it work? Nefesh Erev Yom Tov, Nechalas Yom Tov. You bake them on Erev Shavuos, and then after the sheep are shechted and the blood sprinkled, then they're eaten. That's Lishnayim. That's a case of 2 days. Yeah, this is mamash the 2 days. Yeah, today, tomorrow, 2 days. Chal Yom Tov liyas achar Shabbos. Let's say Erev Yom Tov is Shabbos, and Shavuos is on a Sunday. Nechalos liyom tov l'shleisha. Then it's eaten on Yom Tov, but it's the 3rd day because it's baked not on Friday. It's baked not on Shabbos. It's baked on Friday. So that's Friday, Shabbos, Sunday. It's 3 days. Mishein doichaleis Shabbos v'leis Yom Tov. And if you say tzorchi Shabbos nasim b'Yom Tov, if I'm allowed to make food for Shabbos on Yom Tov, because Shabbos and Yom Tov is one kedusha, hashta the Shabbos b'Yom Tov shari, the Yom Tov b'Yom Tov mibai. Why do you make a big deal about making it on Yom Tov itself? Because at the moment that I'm baking it on Yom Tov, I can't eat it. If you bake it on Yom Tov for Shabbos, it's acceptable. So on Yom Tov, for Yom Tov, for sure it should be acceptable. Why does it have to be 2 days? It could always be on Shavuos. I know you can't eat it at the moment, but so what? If it's one kedusha, according to you, Shabbos and Yom Tov is one kedusha. So Yom Tov and Yom Tov is one kedusha. It's the same day. Shani Hasam Damakra Lachem V'lei L'Gvaya. Lachem V'lei L'Gvaya. He responds, he says, you're not allowed to bake on Yom Tov for the temple. You're only allowed to bake for your own eating. I guess the Shtei Alechem wasn't eaten, I guess. What was it done? What was done with it? Was it offered on? It can't have been offered on the Mizbeach unless it was matzah. I think it was matzah. No, the Shtei Alechem wasn't matzah. Okay, whatever the case is, it says Lachem. Do you have any notes over there? What does it say? What's the pshat? Lachem v'lei l'gvaya. Wow. So even though they were eaten, but that wasn't the primary purpose of it. The primary purpose was that it was considered a sacrifice, and so therefore the heter on Yom Tov of Eichel Nefesh is only for food, regular food, not for sacrifice food. What does Reb Shimon ben Gamliel say? It says Lachem. What's the pasuk? Right? Only what's for you is what you're allowed to eat. So what does Reb Shimon ben Gamliel? He says that you're allowed to bake the lechem apanim on Yom Tov. Savarla kabashal. He learns the kabashal dar melachem v'lei lenachrim. That you're not allowed to bake on Yom Tov for a non-Jew. That's why on Yom Tov you're not allowed to have non-Jewish guests. You're allowed to, if you have a non-Jew that you need to invite for Shabbos, not for Yom Tov. Why not for Yom Tov? Because you may end up cooking because you have a guest. You may end up, cooking, and you're not allowed to cook for a non-Jew on Yom Tov. You're only allowed to cook for a Jew. So yeah, people talk about you can't invite a non-Jew to a Seder. I don't know if there's really an issue in that. The issue is that you can't invite him to Yom Tov. The Yom Tov. It doesn't have to do with the Seder. It has to do with the Yom Tov, right? Yeah. So if he shows up, that's fine. But you're not allowed to invite. You're not allowed to invite. Yeah, you're not allowed to invite to the Seder. because it's a Yom Tov meal, not because it's a Seder and you're, something about a Korban Pesach. Maybe they're thinking it's a Korban Pesach. Maybe that's what people think. Because of Korban Pesach, you want to come. But I don't know if that really is the significant. The significant halacha is that you can't invite the Yom Tov meal. Same thing you can't do on Shavuos. If he drops in, it's not a problem. What do you do if there's an intermarriage? So what they do is they invite the Jewish spouse and they don't say anything. Yeah. Shalach lei Rav Chisda l'Rabba b'yad Rav Acha bar Rav Huna. Rav Chisda sends a question to Rabba in the hand of Rav Acha bar Rav Huna. He says, "Mi amrin and Hayel, do you really say Hayel?" But we have a Mishnah. Mishnah says, "Yesh chayish telemechad v'chayav mishum shmein alavin." It's possible that a person plows one field and he violates 8 prohibitions in that one act. Let's see. How does he do this? My son came home from yeshiva. He said, "How's it possible to say 20 brachas on an apple?" So the answer that his Rebbe wanted was that he wanted to eat it after Havdalah. You're not allowed to eat before Havdalah, so you have to say Shemon Esrei and then say Havdalah, whatever. But my son came up with 20 brachas. He didn't realize that was the way the thought process. He said, "Well, you can say Bayrei." Nice and teva peres, very creates on the seeds. You can make maybe a shahakal on the. Want to figure it out? Okay, so how do you get 8 lavin with plowing one field, one row of a field? He says, you plowed with an ox and a donkey together. That's one prohibition. You're not allowed to do that. And both of them were sanctified. The ox was a bechar, a korban, and the chamar was hektish. So that's 2 prohibitions already. So then you have 3 prohibitions. V'kalayim b'keren, the field that you were plowing was kalayim, and you're not allowed to plant the kalayim, and plowing it is part of that. Ushvius, and it happened to be on Shemitah, and it was b'yomtiv. It was on Shemitah, it was in the yomtiv, and that field also. The guy that was plowing was a kohen, and he was also a nazir, and the field was a beis hatumah. There was someone buried there, so it was all tummy. They got 8 prohibitions. Wild. The iyamrin and hayel. So here's this question: if you say hayel, that's since something. So achrisha le'lechayev. Why is he chayev for plowing? Maybe that plowing that he was doing was covering over the bird of a shechted bird. If you shecht a bird or a wild animal, you have to do kisei adam. So here, what he was doing is, he shouldn't be plowing he shouldn't be violating plowing on Yom Tov. All of the prohibitions are there. But the one prohibition that we could possibly take off is that wasn't plowing, that was covering blood. And on Yom Tov, you're allowed to cover blood. You're allowed to cover blood. So, there's a whole discussion. How to get the dirt for Yom Tov, right? But so it shouldn't be a malacha on Yom Tov. It should be just a covering of the blood. Even though there was no bird there and there was no blood there, but hayel, because it could have been, it should become mutter. Amar Rav Papa Bar Shmuel me'avanim merkuz. We're talking about that. What you actually plowed was stones. It was like gravel, and you can't use stones for kisei adam. So that's the explanation. It says, well, if you say hayel ru'uyas l'kaicham, you could grind up those stones into powder, and then use that ground gravel turn it into dust. It says, "Kedisha b'Yom Tov mishari." No, there's no heter to grind stones on Yom Tov. That's still going to be a prohibition, so you can't. So ru'uyas l'kaicham kalachiyad. 1 second, I get it, but I can do it in an abnormal fashion, and then it won't be a biblical prohibition. Anything that I do in an abnormal way, I'll do it with my elbow. I'll grind it up in the right, and then I'll be able to use it. It'll be derabanan. It says no, bitsunma. We're talking about that it wasn't stones. It was talking about the hard earth. It was the bed, like the bedrock. Bitsunma barzrihu. So how did he plant over there? You can't plant in the bedrock. It says tunma malmayla v'afetichoch malmata. Actually, there was a hard rock on top, and beneath it was the dirt. Says, well, you're not resolving anything. Say what he was doing was the dirt that was beneath it that he needed for the kisei adam. No, he didn't have to. We're looking for a case where you won't have the answer that it was kisei adam. They said betina. We're talking about that it was like mud. So you can't use mud for kisei adam. It says betina barzriu, and mud you can plant it. It says b'mesuna. We're talking about that it is a type of mud that doesn't crumble, but you can still plant in it. It's not that wet. It's not betina. It's more like tit. So there's a prohibition of plowing, but there's no exception of using it for. Why? Because you can only use to cover the blood, dirt that will crumble. But this was all wet. Okay, Esvei Abaya. Abaya has a question on Rabbah. Rabbah says that we say hayal. It says, Hamavashal gid hanashe b'chalav. If someone cooks the gid hanashe with milk, b'yamtiv, on yamtiv, this is not as wild as the other case. This is a letdown. So, v'oichlai, and then he eats it, like a chamesh, he gets 5 times malchus. Like a mishum mavashal gid b'yamtiv. Well, he cooked on yamtiv, and he can't eat it, so that's malchus. Like a mishum oichel gid, and then he ate it. So, in the gid hanashe is aser, according to the opinion that yesh b'gidim b'nais tam, that it's edible. But like a mishum mavashal basa b'chalav, and he also gets malchus because he cooked milk and meat. The gid is meat and with milk. We're up to 3. Then he ate the basar b'chalav. That's 4. And it was on Yom Tov. So he made a fire. But if you say hayel, it's 1 second. You shouldn't be chayev for making a fire. Hayel the chazilei letzarkin maybe needs the fire for some other purpose. You can. If every malacha, since you could have done it for another purpose, it becomes mutter according to Rabbah. So why is this a prohibition of making a fire? You needed it for to warm, to whatever, to cook. Something that was permissible. Amalei apikavar vayal gidanasha shel nevela. Take out that aspect of the burning, which was an isser on Yom Tov, and say that there was another problem over here because the actual animal was an avela also, so it was even treif. Easy to throw in another prohibition. The problem is, Vatani Rab Chia taught on that Mishnah, it says, Leikin shtayim al achilase v'shalish al bishulei. It says 2 of the malchus were because of cooking, because of eating, and 3 were because of cooking. Now, what we just did was we took out havara and we put in a nevela that it wasn't kosher. Now means we're left. We have 3 on the eating now. There's 3 prohibitions of the eating. Say that what you did here was you took wood that wasn't prepared before Yom Tov to be used. Muktzah deraisa, that's a problem. You get malchus for that. That's a deraisa. Amalayin, yes, that's a problem. It says that you have to prepare on Friday. It says that you're not allowed to use this. You're not allowed to do any work, and you use this work, according to one opinion, muktzah is a deraisa. It's if it was separated, it wasn't designated for use. Amalei, Abaya says to Rabba, Va'atu damrit by minim Rav Chisda, Varmila by minim Rav Huna, Hevi Semi Afar B'Shachti Tamid B'Yam Tov Ma'u. Abaya says to Rabba, but you yourself told me that you asked from Rav Chisda, and you asked from Rav Huna, or some say you asked from Rav Huna, or it was asked. And the question was like this: if someone brings a sheep from the meadow and they shechted the carbon tamid on Yom Tov, what's the din? Now, this wasn't designated before to be shechted. And you quoted the pasuk from Yecheskel that says, what about all the sacrifices? The pasuk says, Achas minatzayin minamasayim mimashki Yisrael. He quotes in Yecheskel, it talks about what the service of the Kainim. So he learns like this. That you can't bring a carbon tamid if it's a firstborn, because that's a different sacrifice. Achas, you need to bring a carbon tamid, v'lei meiser, it can't be an animal that was meiser. That meant that it was a different sacrifice. Minatzoina needs to be from the sheep. It can't be if it's in between ages. It can't be in between the ages. It can't be in its 13th month. It's not in its first year. It's not in its second year. It has to be in its second year. We're talking about that it needs to be permissible that if there would be in that if you're taking wine in the pit, it needs to have 200 times whatever was put in. This tells us that arla, if it would have been prohibited, becomes bottle in 200. And mimashki Yisrael, minamutali Yisrael needs to be something that's permissible. From here they said, you can't bring the libation, the wine libation, from something that the meister wasn't taken. It's called tevel, unfixed, untied. Maybe if it's a carbon, you can't bring from mukta. It means it wasn't designated. Amrit matevel miyuchad sheisir gufay garam lai afkol sheisir gufay garam lai yatsa mukta shenis gufay garam lai eli isir davaracha garam lai. Mukta is not usher because of itself. Mukta is usher because it wasn't designated before the Yom Tov. That's a secondary prohibition that's imposed on it. It's not intrinsically prohibited, and therefore the sacrifice that you brought that wasn't designated before Yom Tov is fine. But if you say mukta is a deraisa according to what you just said, what's the difference? You can't bring it. And another problem is you said that there's going to be on Shabbos, if you do several prohibitions, you get malchus for each one. On Yom Tov, if you do several prohibitions, there's only one malchus. You just said that you're going to get malchus because of mukta, and you're going to get malchus also because you cooked on Yom Tov. It's something that wasn't edible. You can't divide it up. It's only one malchus. The Gemara answers, we're talking about that the wood came from an ashera of a desert tree. And here's the prohibition. You're not allowed to use anything from Avodah Zarah. You're not allowed to keep it. You're not allowed to own it. Say that the wood was hektish. Aha. Avodah Zarahs you burn, you don't burn hektish for personal things. Okay, let's leave it over here.